Greetings everyone, I hope you're well and having a great day. I'm Donovan and welcome to Burnout and Brake Stuff. This week's BBS video will be covering project updates. Since I have so many things going on with project vehicles at one time, it's hard to stay on one vehicle due to parts availability, both from outside suppliers and my own ability to find the parts here at my Project Parts Puzzle Palace. So anywho, in order to keep everybody up to date, because some people like 57 Power Wagons, some people like 77 Ramchargers, some people like, A-body muscle cars. Got a lot going on. So, let's get into the video and let's check out our projects and see our current status. I greatly appreciate everyone stopping by, checking in, viewing what we have going on. Thanks for the objective, positive comments and sharing and subscribing. All important stuff to the channel. Thank you very much, and I really hope that everyone has a wonderful day. So let's get busy. Our 77 Ramcharger is enjoying the sunshine. It's out getting a sunburn. Nice dry Oregon climate in the summertime. Once you get to June, it pretty much stops raining and temperatures go up. And so we're getting the parts closer together. Have the fuel tank and the shield there under it, sitting ready for installation. So that's where we are with the exterior portion of it outside the shop. Let's go inside and view our engine and part stash in there. This is where I had the pile of Ramcharger parts stash from the interior set here on the floor, and I have made some progress in getting these parts. I haven't labeled the one above into totes, so I have that organized, been able to go through the old cardboard mess and clean that stuff up and determine what I have for it, what's ready for installation, and further parts that I will need. Let's take a look at the engine progress. So here's our Ramcharger 440 and some of the issues that I've been working through with it. All learning experience, right? No matter how many years we work on something, sometimes we come across things that we haven't experienced before. And that's putting a rear main seal in this engine with it assembled. So never done that before, and I would expect it to leak on my first go round, but at least I would only have to try a second time by removing the oil pan and the seal itself instead of having the engine taken apart as far as I do. I've run into issues with finding studs long enough to use with the headers that I have and the gasket material because the flanges are really thick. I don't want the header to leak, so I generally spend more money on a quality header than a cheap header with thin flanges that works with heat cycling. Learning some new camera equipment has posed some difficulties as well in trying to video with it. So once again, just a learning experience, not a big deal. Don't get frustrated with it, just work through the issues. I can shift gears from this project to another project. These issues can stay in the back of my mind while I work on other things, and generally the solution presents itself over time. So it's not worth getting frustrated over. Projects are supposed to be fun, right? One might also ask, if they watch the other videos on this, well, why did you bother to put a rear main seal in it? Why did you bother to replace the pan gasket, that type of thing? Because in those videos, there wasn't oil on the floor, but the pan gasket itself was made out of cork. A cork material as a gasket material is very similar to an old oil lamp with a wick and a flame. The cork draws oil or whatever it's trying to keep inside into itself and then expands. Eventually that cork's going to fail. The rear main seal, when I would look up underneath the engine, I could see a small drop of oil hanging from the crank. It's a whole lot easier for me to replace this stuff while it's outside of the vehicle. That's on me. That way, when I go to sell it, the next caretaker hopefully doesn't have to deal with any of those issues. I'll put this engine, you know, on the stand like it is. Once I'm done doing all of my repairs, I'm gonna run it several times, get it up to operating temperature like I did in previous videos, and then shut it down and let it sit over here for a while. And I'm gonna look for leaks, whether it's coolant, exhaust manifold leaks, or header leaks, and oil leaks from the rear main seal, the pan, the front timing cover, that type of thing. I'm really looking to do the best job that I can to pass on a quality product to the next caretaker so they don't have to deal with it, and then they don't have buyer's remorse over it. Now, can I guarantee that nothing is going to go wrong? No, I can't. But realistically speaking, if I make these videos and I show folks what I've done, they can come to these videos prior to purchase, they can see what's going on and determine whether or not I'm a hack or that I somewhat know what I'm doing. So that's where we are with this project, and let's move on to the next one. Okay, our 73 Dart Sport is outside in the sun and keeping our 77 Ramcharger company. I mean, it's almost like going back in time here. 73 Dart Sport, 77 Dodge Power Wagon, excuse me, Ramcharger. So many vehicles, sometimes it's hard to keep them straight. We got the coupe windows popped out there to keep the inside temperatures down a little bit. Windows open a little bit, getting that air out. Oh, looks like my cover's falling off the dash, so I better get that back up there to help protect the dash pad and prevent it from cracking, type of a deal. So outside wise, nothing's really changed that much. Let's go check out our 340. With our 340 out of the parts washing tank, let it sit in there for, like I said, see you in about a week, little buddy. Pulled it out of the tank, pressure washed it all down, you know, so it's pretty clean. Been able to give it a visual inspection, and found a number in number 6. There's a sleeve in there, so it was sleeved from the factory, near as I can tell. It has all of its factory bearings in it, and it was run, I guess, up until about 1989. The paperwork I have is December of 89. It was off the road. The registration had expired in December of 89. So the car was on the road approximately 15, 16 years. And my investigation is leading to Chrysler sent this engine out the door in that car as its short block presents itself. Another issue that we ran into with this particular engine was it looks like the crank had been damaged, most likely during assembly process at some point in time, whether it fell against something or whatever, marked it up, and the oil hole for the number 1 rod bearing is shaped more like a jet, or a nozzle, I should say. Instead of it being open with the chamfer to where it could spread oil everywhere, side of that oiling is folded over in such a way that it forms more like a nozzle. And so what I intend on doing is taking a drill bit, running it through the other, through the back side of the hole. It's a cross-drilled crank, straightening that hole out, and then putting a chamfer on it. So I believe that will fix that issue, because all of our bearings look great. All the mains look excellent, and that was the only one rod bearing that looked, out of place. So I think that will repair that issue. Gently set that there. The pistons and rod assemblies, I've been soaking in a thing of simple green. I couldn't put these pistons in with the parts cleaner for this because it eats aluminum, and I don't want to destroy the pistons. I want to reuse them. Everything about them is decent so far that I can see. I have a few more pistons left to clean up, and the one anomaly that I noticed with my piston assemblies is the number 6 piston. the rings are stuck in the lands. And I'm wondering if that has something to do with the sleeve in number 6, whether it doesn't dissipate heat as well as the other one, because I don't know how a sleeve is necessarily put in. I know that they overbore it to fit the size of the sleeve, but I'm wondering if there's some type of issue with heat exchange into the cooling jackets, because none of the other pistons are with stuck rings. Or it could be something along the lines of the oiling hole here isn't getting enough oil on the cylinder. So I'm not sure about that, but I think with a good cleanup, it'll be fine. Like I say, I believe Chrysler sent this engine out the door with the sleeve, with the crank, with the damage in it like that, and it was on the road for 15 years until whatever happened to it. So I'm just going to keep investigating and moving forward with basically a re-ring and rebearing of what I have here. The cylinder heads will need to go into the cleaning tank as well as the intake manifold, the valve covers, and I will take the cylinder heads apart and I will make sure that I keep every single valve where it belongs, where it originally came from, so that way the wear pattern that it has with its seat, it's already established. I put that valve back where it belongs. I put the new springs that go with the camshaft, lifters, and the cam kit. I put those back together, and we'll just snap this thing all back together in basically its factory condition, put it on our run stand like our Ramcharger engine, and run it and see what happens. I'm only out really my time and a small amount of money as things go. I have a set of rod and main bearings that I've had stashed away for years that I'd long since forgotten about. I remember standing in line at Napa and they were on the clearance table. And I'm like, wow, $10 for rod bearings? And you know, I can't remember, I think the price tag's on the main bearings, I'm not sure. I can't remember the name of the manufacturer, but we'll get into that video. This is just trying to get an update of where we are. And so that's where this project currently lies, is still in the cleaning, investigating, and getting it ready for assembly. So let's move on to the next project. Okay, I was just kidding. There was a note for the 340 that is basically the hinge pin, if that's the appropriate term, the crux of anything that involves moving forward with this is the complication of externally balancing this particular engine. In April of 1972, Chrysler, with the 340, especially since it was on its way out for production, they started using cast cranks instead of forged steel cranks. I believe the 4-speed cars in 72 still had steel cranks, but the automatic cars received external balanced cast cranks. And since I did not receive a torque converter when I purchased the car, I'm left with the dilemma of solving the external engine balancing issue. So right here, this is for a 360. And these are the external weights that are added to a 360's converter to balance it. And the 340 weight is different. The Chrysler had a parts kit for this particular application for cast crank 340s, 400s, and 440s. I believe the part number is 4120-241. And they gave the instructions and the weights and where to mount the weights, welding them in place. The torque converter and flex plate only bolt up one way, and that's how these become placed in the appropriate way to balance the crank along with this D-shaped eccentric on the hub. That kit's been out of production, near as I can tell, for quite some time. Sometimes it shows up here or there. If you're lucky, you end up with one. I was able to go through the Mopar Performance Chassis book and find the weights listed in there for flywheels, 340, I think it said it was 4.22 ounces. So then it's just a matter of being able to space it evenly between the lugs, weld that weight on, and away I go. I believe I might have found a kit from Montecati. They accepted my credit card information. They show the part as accepted into their system, but I have not received any confirmation email from them. They have the part. So I think I found that on Friday. So it's Tuesday now. I'm not sure what will happen as far as them getting back to me, whether they have it or not. So I have routes, alternatives that I'm trying to figure out how to make this work before investing any more real time and you know, especially money into this. So that's where I am with this. I needed to put that bit of information in there, and for some reason it slipped out in the earlier section. So we've got that covered. Let's move on to our next project here, Roadie, the 73 Roadrunner. Okay, on to Project Roadie, our 73 Roadrunner. I was really hopeful that I would be able to just do some basic maintenance and repair and get Roadie back out on the road. And I have been able to drive Roadie a little bit here and there between the repairs, you know, the maintenance. And what happened, one thing leads to another. And in this particular instance, I believe it's a deal where the car is looking out for itself, if you will, if an inanimate object can look out for itself. The deck lid, the lock failed, trunk, whatever you want to call it. The deck lid, the lock failed, and so I had to, you know, go through the back seat like I did in the video to get it open, and then I just, from this point, because the lock was broke, I had to figure out how to fix it, because I wanted to keep the same key that works in the glove box, that type of thing. So anyhow, I had everything removed from the trunk, the back seat was out of it, and I'd worked so much on the car, you know, trying to straighten the rear valance panel, that type of thing. And I took the car out for a drive. So now with no back seat, no divider board in the back, the inside of the car is pretty loud. Driving it down the road, and I hear what sounds like a rotor or a drum being turned in a drum machine or a rotor machine. You know, back in the day when they used to do stuff like that, I don't know if they still do. So anyway, I hear this grinding sound. It's almost like maybe one of the springs in the drum assembly there, the backing plate, had broken and was hanging onto the drum and making that noise. So anyway, I got the car back to the house and just parked it. Wasn't ready to deal with the potential of replacing Timken bearings on the axles, or worse yet, the housing. The bearing had been spinning inside the housing and making the housing oblong. I think I've run into that before. That's another story. So anyway, after my mind had settled and I was ready to investigate the issue to see what was going on, brought the car in the shop, lifted the rear, pulled the rear tires and drums off, and checked just by hand motion the end play to see if I had excessive end play, an adjustment, or the bearings are bad. And I haven't determined that yet. The end play adjustment done on the Duster in the earlier video brings me to maybe I'm just going through a deal where I need to do bearing adjustments. So anyway, with it up off the floor, wheels off, drums off, the passenger side, the axle's really tight, there's no movement in it at all. The driver's side, however, there's a lot of movement, a lot of slop in it. But that can be deceiving without putting a dial indicator on there. I haven't got that far yet. Another issue that happened while I had the interior of the car out was I brought the new seat covers. I purchased new seat foams because back in 1998, when the seat covers were purchased for the car, 98, 99, that's in the paperwork. When they were purchased for this car, seat foams were not available. So one would have to rely on the interior shop to, you know, outfit the seat frame with the appropriate seat foam, stretch the covers over it, and away you go. So I bought the seat foams. I took the covers out of the storage with the parts that came with it, brought it to the interior shop. Interior shop called me several days later when they were able to get to it. I think it was a couple of weeks before they were able to get to my stuff, and said they had an issue. Well, the seat covers, the foam that gives the seat cover itself its basic shape, had dry rotted and deteriorated, and if they installed the covers that way, they were going to be sagging and, you know, unappealing to look at. Still more appealing to look at than the seat covers that were in it that were shredded. So I had them put those seat covers on, expecting to be able to drive the car, when I ended up finding out the bearings were bad, or potentially the bearings were bad. Just another project, another issue that I have to solve. So I'm not ready to sell the car. I'd like to keep it for a while and enjoy it. So I have to put it on the back burner and work on the things that I have more ready for sale. So that's where we are with Project Roadie. Is I need to check the axle bearing adjustment and determine whether or not I have a bad axle bearing. I've learned from the Duster project, it's a pretty simple procedure. So I had never had anyone in the 43 years that I've worked on these cars, I never had anybody ever teach me that adjustment or talk about that adjustment. When anybody ever pulled an 8 3/4, yard the axles out, swap a differential, you know, from whatever 323 open to a 456 or whatever they were doing, just slam the axles back in it, tighten them down. Most people didn't even use torque specs on it, just buzz it down with an air ratchet or whatever and get it out, go have fun. So, you know, it's still like life, it's all a good learning experience and all in how we handle it. So when time permits, I'll get the axle adjustment done on it, take the car for a test drive and see whether or not we need axle bearings. So that's where we are with this one. All right, on to the next. With our Duster hood all pressure washed and cleaned up, I was able to find hinges, a fiberglass hood scoop, the metal parts that have been cut out of the hood in case I have to put those parts back in. This hood scoop would not be my first choice, nor would the steel hood. I'd much rather a pin-on style fiberglass hood, but once again, I'm using what I have and I'm making do with that as best as I can. So the intent here with this particular air cleaner is to be able to use the factory parts and then be able to seal this air cleaner to this hood with this air scoop using the 1969 only fresh air induction air cleaner assembly that I purchased from eBay a number of years ago. So that's what that would look like. Take the hood scoop off. Here's our rubber gasket, grommet if you will, gasket. It has holes in it to where I can hopefully be able to screw it to the underside of the hood, have the hood closed down. Now we have a sealed fresh air induction system for our 74 Duster 440 project. That's where I am with this one at this point in time. Let's move on to our last project. Last but not least. Last up, but certainly not least, our 1957 Power Wagon. This is will be going up for sale soon. I brought it up here to do a coolant flush on it. Wanted to drain the block, flush the coolant out of it, put a gallon of antifreeze in it, and the rest topped up with distilled water. One of those situations where one step forward, kind of 3 steps backwards, if one will, and it seems as though the thermostat may be stuck so I'll probably have to drain the coolant down enough to swap out a thermostat. I still have to troubleshoot it yet, haven't got that far. The valve cover gaskets leak. Fortunately, I have valve cover gaskets to install. I don't like working on greasy, sludge, oily, slimy rigs. I like to pressure wash them and clean them up. And oil belongs on the inside of the engine, not on the outside. Passenger side one in the back's draining pretty bad onto the exhaust manifold and the oil filter. So I get that repaired. And the other issue that was one that really put the brakes on the whole project is the steering issue. So someone at some point in time converted it to power steering, and I recognized the Saginaw unit they installed came from a 73 to 77, somewhere in that area, Dodge truck. And fortunately for me, digging through my parts stash and looking what was in there, the 1973 D100 that I had, I still have the power steering sector, the hoses, and the pump as a unit to be able to put back in place. In the earlier video of the truck, I was also missing some interior components as far as gauges and trim pieces for the dash. And so what I'll do right now is take a brief walk around of the truck, show the parts that I have set aside for the repairs and the parts that go with the truck. Most likely I will definitely not be finishing the fuel tank and the wiring unless somebody for some reason wants it fixed and they're willing to pay me before I sell it to get it there. So let's just take a brief walk around and look at what we have set aside, look at what we've improved upon since the first video of the truck, and go from there. Okay, let's take a brief walk around from the truck here. We have a spare driver's side door, and this one has very little rust in it comparative to the one on the truck, so that door also goes with it. Here's our Saginaw power steering sector replacement for this truck. And what I would like to have done, as I was using a 72 Dodge B series van steering column and the like for the truck, and converting it to where I could use more of a standard rag joint and coupling joint from a more modern 70s truck, since that was the direction they started with this. And I'll see how that goes. I'm not going to end up getting the van column in it, so we'll move on to, there's a 1957 Poly 318 4-barrel intake manifold that goes with it. That happens to have the Will Carter WC FB, Will Carter 4-barrel flange to it. Last I checked, they make adapters to be able to adapt a more modern AFB, AVS, whatever one would like to there. Or I just like 4 barrels over the 2 barrels because they are a lot more convenient for replacement parts. There's another 3-speed transmission that came with it, that will go with it. And there's the fuel tank brackets that go with it. And so I will finish cleaning up the front of it and get the turn signal park lights back in it. Take a brief walk this way. And I'm amazed at how good of condition that wood bed for 66 years old. It's in pretty doggone good shape. LED tail lights. And what really adds to the interior is having its original instrumentation in it once again. So that brightens up the interior instead of having a bunch of holes in the dash. And like I was saying before, I was using the 72 B series van parts that I had to outfit the wiring and switch arrangement instead of a bunch of toggle switches. I'll show you the pile of wiring that was in it when I got it. Yeah, so it looks a lot better than it was. And like I said, I'll make another video of it before we get ready to sell it, showing the repair work done to it. And let's go check on the other parts that I have, because these trim parts for these trucks are almost impossible to find. They're out there and they're very, very expensive. And there are two pieces of trim that go on the front of the truck here. The one in the lower section is a crosshair, which, as far as I know, 1957 Dodge Power Wagon is the very first civilian model Power Wagon, you know, four-wheel drive truck for the civilian market. It wasn't marketed to the military. And it has a lower, I believe it's made out of stainless, I could be wrong, crosshair that goes in the bottom. I think I saw one of those a decade ago on eBay for like $900, insanity. And there's also I call it a mustache bar that goes on the very center, and there's 5 holes on the front of the truck there for that. That was not included with the truck. I don't have that. So that would be on the next person to decide what they want to do with it. Now we can go into the other parts room and check out what we have for those parts. I've rounded up all the parts that I have for the 57 Power Wagon. I have a tote on the floor that's full of parts for it, but a lot of this stuff I feel like is probably junk, but I believe that it should go with the vehicle so the next caretaker can determine what parts they do or don't like. Some of them I believe are still original to the truck. I mean, I replaced the fronts with LEDs, but I left the hole to where the original lens and housings could be returned to service. Try not to ruin any of that type of originality in case, you know, somebody wants to keep that. Here's the crosshair that I was talking about for the lower section. It has some small spots on it that aren't perfect. I have my intake manifold gaskets for the 4-barrel and the valve cover gaskets that are currently leaking that are made out of cork. They need to be replaced. And here's a good box of representation of junk that was the wiring in it to begin with. That's not it. Choke cable and other things. Voltage regulator for the generator. I think this is an instrument panel for 58 and later, up to something in the early 60s. But yeah, I don't want to dump this box of garbage out onto the wiring garbage and the like. That was what I was contending with, along with the steering issue back when I first purchased the vehicle, and other things happened in life, so that's that. I put it on the back burner for doing other things. At least I stored it and took care of it for the last decade. Here are the wiring pigtails and the like for the current wiring project, grommets, relays and bases, that type of thing. These are the clip clamps for split loom, the wiring loom, for getting that done. And yes, there's a shift boot from Chrysler. I believe that's a Jeep, more current model Jeep Wrangler or whatever. And so yes, here's the assemblies for the front park light turn signal arrangements. And these are the old original style Grote, I believe they are. Yeah, Grote it says on there. At least Grote made the replacement lenses. These are the taillight assemblies for it. I just hung LEDs off of it. So, you know, if somebody doesn't like that, they can convert it back. So these are some of the parts. There's some window frames. I have the steering column for the van that I was using to modify the steering sector and steering issues. So that's all in there. And hopefully that'll make it more convenient, easier for the next caretaker to put together. As I recall, it's in my paperwork. I have wiring diagrams drawn out for all the work that I did. So if a person is, you know, good at doing wiring, it should be fairly simple for them, or they can completely scrap it and put a painless wiring kit in it, something along those lines. So that's what I have for now for project updates, and I really appreciate everyone, you know, tuning in and subscribing, sharing, like I said, objectively commenting. Positive things are always good to hear. So I hope that everyone has an excellent day, because that's the most important part of living, is finding that happiness, finding a way to relax and enjoy one's life. So to all of you, thank you very much for tuning in, and have a great day.